Hi all, and welcome to my UBD unit on the salmon life cycle. As I've noted up here, this unit is designed for students in the primary grades, so first, second, third graders. I specifically designed this unit for the second graders I was working with while I was student teaching this semester. This was a group of kids with moderate computer experience. However, throughout this presentation, I'll point out ways that the unit could be adapted for a different group of primary students. The essential questions for this unit are: what patterns exist in the natural world? How can those patterns help individuals survive? How are living things connected? And how do scientists share their ideas and observations? Students will leave this unit understanding that all living organisms follow a specific life cycle pattern, and responsible harvest depends upon people's knowledge of that pattern. Students will also understand that all living organisms are impacted by their environment, which might include other organisms. So, for instance, salmon can be severely impacted by the actions of people in their environment. Students will understand that scientists organize and communicate all stages of the learning process, including questions, information, observations. And finally, students will understand that scientists are able to clearly communicate ideas and understand each other's work by focusing on big ideas and putting those ideas in order. Ultimately, students will be able to independently use their learning to plan responsible subsistence harvest using the life cycle patterns of important local organisms. They will be able to locate information in nonfiction books and communicate their thinking using language and technology. Students will develop these essential understandings through acquisition of these skills and this knowledge. So over here I've listed some specific items like being able to sequence the stages of the salmon life cycle, being able to name some different salmon harvest techniques, identifying access features of nonfiction books, using software to organize text and images and communicate ideas. So these are the basic skills that are going to contribute to those overall understandings. As you can see here, this unit addresses several of the Alaska content standards. Obviously, we're going to cover some important life science topics, and as I'll explain shortly, the performance assessment and learning activities also involve a number of writing and language arts skills, such as editing and publishing students' own writing, and communicating using varied tools of electronic technology. We're going to be doing a lot of both of those in this unit. And finally, we'll be using technology to share work products and to communicate with one another. So I've listed several relevant NET standards as well. Here, I've listed all the ways I will gather evidence to show students essential understandings and acquisition of skills in this unit. The main assessment will be a performance task in which students write a story from the perspective of a salmon. Stories will cover the entire salmon life cycle, with attention to various threats the salmon might face during each life cycle stage. Students will use iMovie to record an oral reading of their story with scanned illustrations, and will then upload finished recordings to KidBlog in order to receive digital comments from their teacher and peers. I will be using this rubric as a guide to provide feedback prior to publishing, to encourage self-evaluation, and to evaluate and provide comments on students' published work. The expectation is that students will cover all main stages of the salmon life cycle in order, with accurate descriptions and illustration of habitat and threats for each stage. The stories should also make sense and be readable, and have a beginning, middle, and end, as well as a problem during each stage. In addition to the salmon story performance task, students will complete a number of formative assessments in their individual science notebooks. These assessments are linked to classroom activities and include labeled diagrams, reflections, and observations. These activities are all outlined more specifically here. I will be using this rubric to check completion of open-ended entries in students' journals and offer feedback based on the three variables of accuracy and detail, conventions, and scientific inquiry. These evaluations will give me an idea of whether students are grasping the skills and content knowledge of this unit. At the very end of the unit, students will use their formative assessment activities to create a digital science journal. This final project will require students to self-assess and think critically about their work as they revise and organize. Students will use this rubric to self-assess their science journal pages according to accuracy and detail, conventions, and organization. As you can see, the specific criteria in this rubric are adapted so that they make sense to a primary student. So the language is very simple, there's not very many sentences, and these are concepts that a 7 or 8-year-old could understand. In this section, I've described the various learning activities that will take place throughout the unit. Basically, we'll start with a general focus on the entire salmon life cycle, and then we'll zoom in on specific stages. Within that first general focus, we'll list what we know and wonder about salmon. We'll do some read-alouds, do various activities surrounding the order and names of different life cycle stages, and then review with a fun video. I'll introduce the Salmon Story Performance task during this time by reading a local author's published book written from the perspective of a salmon. One big specific focus will be the egg stage. During this time we will visit a spawning stream and actually watch a biologist mix salmon eggs and milt in a classroom incubator tank. Students will begin conducting observations of these fertilized eggs, and they will use a document camera to magnify and diagram an egg and work in small groups to build and test redds, or nests, for sample salmon eggs. As students focus on the early stages of the salmon life cycle, they'll also be writing the corresponding sections of their salmon life cycle stories. We'll continue through the various stages of the salmon life cycle with a particular focus on the anatomy and harvest of adult and spawning salmon. After finishing all 6 sections of their salmon stories, students will practice reading their stories fluently with a partner. I'll scan the students' illustrations and upload those to individual Dropbox folders. After setting up individual laptops, I'll use the smartboard to model opening a Dropbox folder, downloading images, and putting illustrations in order in iMovie. This step will give students a chance to review the sequence of various life cycle stages. Next, students can change the time on each image, and record themselves as they read their stories out loud. Once students have recorded their stories, the finished movies will be exported and uploaded as attachments on KidBlog. KidBlog is a very simple blogging interface specifically designed for secure use by primary grade children. Once I've posted my movie, other class members can watch it by clicking here.
It didn't see me because I was down low by the rocks. I was camouflaged because of the color of my skin. Shadows in the water. We also know how to school together so that we look like.
Students can comment on each other's movies by typing a comment into the little window at the bottom of each blog post and hitting submit. As I've noted here in my Stage 3 document, when students finish uploading their videos and commenting on each other's work, the unit is almost over. However, we're going to keep observing our salmon that are hatching in the classroom tank, and we'll continue making observations in our science notebooks. When the salmon are finally released in the spring, children will work on digitizing their science notebooks using Microsoft Pages. Here, students can rearrange their pages in an order that makes sense to them. They can add a table of contents, and they can add text and edit their work. I chose this specific software for the final project in this unit because it's fairly straightforward and usable for young children. The toolbar up here at the top just has a few options. If I want to add a text box, to my drawing, I can just click up here and it automatically inserts it and gets it ready for entering text. So it's very user-friendly, a little less complicated than, say, Microsoft Word. That, that concludes my presentation on my UBD unit on the salmon life cycle. Here I just have some acknowledgments of sources for my ideas and materials, a few references, and special thanks to my mentor teacher who offered advice and assistance on the development of this unit. Thanks for watching.